So today I'm going to take you through some tips for creating effective open-ended written questions. Let's get started. 3 things that you will need to do before you start crafting your questions are to understand your main research goals. These can be general or specific, and typically your research goals will be more general when you first begin your study, and they will become more specific when you fully determine what it is that you'd like to investigate. You also need to determine what attitudes, behaviors, or understandings that you want to address. These factors will directly influence the types of questions that you will be asking your participants. And you also need to consult previous research. This can easily be done by conducting a literature review in your subject area. After reflecting on these areas, then you'll need to decide on the basic structure of your questions. If you're more interested in asking non-specific broad questions, such as what do you think about traditional textbooks, then general questions are definitely the way to go. If, however, you are interested in creating questions which are more specific in nature, then structured questions might work better for you. These types of questions are open-ended and they will create greater context for participants, which will probably make it easier for them to answer, and in the end, it will yield richer, more detailed data. So an example of a structured question would be, what do you think about replacing traditional textbooks with digital resources in grade 9 to 12 classrooms? Carefully wording your questions. You need to be explicit about what you are asking the participant. Flowery language and long-winded questions can easily lead to participant confusion, and this might result in the participant giving either erroneous information that really isn't of any purpose to the study. Or they might choose not to answer the question at all if they find it either too ambiguous or confusing. So in order to avoid this, it's best to write in simple, plain language and clearly state your question. You'll also want to specify the boundaries of your questions. So ensure beforehand that your questions are not too open so as to be misinterpreted by the participants. Clearly lay out what you are asking, and then set your boundaries in relation to what kind of information you'd like the participant to directly include in their answer. Creating neutral questions. I'd say that this is one of the main factors to being successful if you're using this type of research methodology in practice. In creating neutral questions, researchers need to avoid any form of bias and the formation of leading kinds of questions. This is primarily because these elements can really easily skew the data and severely affect the quality of the participant's answer, as well as the way that the participant answers the questions. And modifying the language of your questions, this should be based on the participant age and level of ability. So obviously for younger participants, you will use smaller words and perhaps shorter questions. And these questions can evolve in complexity depending on participant maturity and knowledge base. For example, if you are working with a post-secondary participant group, the level of question complexity will be higher, and perhaps the length of their responses will be more extensive. No matter what age range or ability level, a good rule of thumb is to not use a whole bunch of academic jargon or research terms, as these can be off-putting and the participant might not understand what you're asking. Another great tip is to be generous with the amount of the blank space that you will allocate for participant answers. Too little space can dissuade participants from fully answering the question, so if you decide to have your participants write their answers on paper, you need to ensure that a large gap is left under the question in order to encourage the participant to write a lot about it. If the questions appear online, then you'll need to create a text box with the capacity to accommodate a longer answer. This is a simple trick, but it will yield great results. And last but not least, you should aim to test your questions in a pilot study. Most researchers that I've interacted with have imparted on me that one of the most useful activities to undertake before embarking on any full-length study is to conduct a pilot study, which in this case will allow for you to test your questions beforehand. The ability to test your questions on family, friends, or willing participants will give you an idea of how clear your questions are, what makes sense, what doesn't, and they'll also let you know what needs to be changed before you embark on your main study. This can include the wording of questions, phrasing, and so on and so forth. All right, thanks so much for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed this video.